I want to welcome you all to room two. We're going to talk about mending our wounds, which is our SCRR terminology for really working on educator healing and healing of self. In this room, we have three presentations today. So if you were in a room before, we had a group presentation. In this room, we have three individual presentations. Each presentation is going to be 8 minutes. We're going to do them all concurrently, and then we'll do a group 15-minute question and answer session, discussion section. In that section, you can address individual fellows with questions. You can address the whole group with questions. It is free flowing. And as a kind reminder to my three fabulous fellows here, I'm going to facilitate that for you so you can be presenters. You don't have to facilitate it. Because I do know, as a facilitator, that hat is always on. So, one final reminder to my dear fellows, please let me know when you'd like me to advance your slides. Okay, we are going to start with Andrea Lopez. Andrea, please take it away.
Thank you, Nikki. Hello, everyone. I am Andrea Lopez, a program manager at University Health Behavioral Health in Kansas City, Missouri. I've worked in the field of mental health the past 21 years, and the last 10 years have been working with children and youth in our department. Our department serves about 200 youth, and we are an outpatient mental health program. We work in the community to decrease stigma and barriers to accessing mental health services. Right before the fellowship started, several of the schools that we served experienced multiple crisis events. I was part of the team that would respond to the events, and upon reflection, often thought I didn't have the tools I needed in order to lead my crisis teams. Nikki, you can change it to the next slide. In the beginning of this fellowship, I thought I was going to create a product for others. I was going to facilitate healing of staff after a suicide loss. And it wasn't until later in the fellowship that Leora said our project could be focused on our own leadership healing. And that resonated really well with me. And I immediately became energized about changing the focus of my project. So the question that I asked myself is, how do I want to lead in times of crisis? Nikki. And so what I decided to do is start a journal of reflections on what I was learning in the fellowship. Often our teachings, SCRR, offered us reflective questions. So I would journal my thoughts on those. I love journaling. It's a good tool to use for processing. And then later looking back on my thoughts and seeing my growth through this year. I was also able to be vulnerable in journaling. And then later, through support of Bree, who was one of our coaches, decided to create my own crisis leadership manifesto. And I was able to do this because of the kindness of the SCRR facilitators and my peers, and how safe I felt throughout this program. So I reflected on my own impactful grief experiences and how they are a part of me and impact how I lead through crisis. Experiencing the loss of a friend through a car accident as a teenager, I feel I'm able to connect with high school age students when they experience a loss, despite the many years that have passed from my loss. Most recently, as a parent, there was a crisis at my son's school. It was outside of the building and no children were hurt. My son was not hurt. Um, and it also was at a school that my agency serves. So had I been working, I would have responded to the crisis professionally, and then I was also experiencing the crisis personally. At the time, I was on leave, so I did not respond professionally to the crisis, and I was able to gather information and see how the school was going to respond as a parent. So I was on the other side of the crisis situation. And so now, unfortunately, I have experienced this crisis and now can understand how parents may feel when there's a crisis at their child's school. So during this fellowship, I learned how the personal and professional affect each other. And prior to this fellowship, I think I tried to separate the two. And after learning more about um, the principles of SCRR, recovery and renewal, it's okay that they impact each other. And so, following all the teachings that I've received and the resources that are on the SCRR website, I decided to use those to create my own crisis manifesto, how I want to lead in times of crisis. And I was also inspired by one of Oriana's workshops, an entry to theory and framework that guides us. So I wanted to share some of the highlights of the manifesto with you. I will build strong relationships. Yes, Nikki, you can go to the next slide.
I can also show your manifesto, which I dropped in the link for folks if you want me to do that. And we have about 2 more minutes. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yes, I
Okay,
can
I'll do that. Hang on
drop
just
that.
a sec. Go ahead and talk and I'll do the screen.
Okay, thank you, Nikki. I will build strong relationships with my team of crisis responders and school staff through open communication and collaboration. I will utilize what I have learned through SCRR to ensure my team is prepared to respond to crisis events. I value my ability to remain calm in a crisis. I am committed to leading with calm and be emotionally present. I will pause all other supervisory responsibilities so I can be available to the school and my staff. I will be emotionally present for all the grief reactions that may emerge. I will create space for my team for structural witnessing and healing. When harm occurs, I will work to repair it. I will sit with the discomfort of not having all the answers and hold space when things feel unresolved. Lastly, I will engage in collective reflection and helping the school grow and be better prepared for future crisis events. And so what I would ask of you, the last slide, Nikki, not to answer now, but questions to ponder. Are you the crisis leader that you want to be or needed during a time of crisis? And are you leading in ways consistent with your values? I also created a tool that can help guide you in creating your own crisis manifesto. And Nikki also will drop that in the chat as well. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrea. We're going to hold questions. If you have them, write them down. Thank you so much. This is such a wonderful, I don't know, maybe we need more positive manifestos, if you will. That's my takeaway from your work this year. I am going to transition us to hear from our next fellow, Lesley Delapaz. Lesley, take it away.
All right, I get to talk. So I'm Lesley Delapaz, trauma-informed coordinator over at Multnomah County in Portland, Oregon, with the Department of County Human Services. So I am a hand knitter, super good at knitting, and I'm just learning how to sew. I'm also an ambitious career mom, and I'm currently hyper-focused on launching my kids in the next 2 years, sadly at their much lower levels of ambition. So there's my intro. What brought me to crisis work and SCRR was like a slew of unexpected deaths at our organization, not of clients, but of staff. And unfortunately, the offerings for adults in the workplace that I was finding were so individualized, and I was really hunting for the collective and community and systemic offerings. And happily, previous fellow Canada Taylor Parker introduced me to the amazing resources being offered by SCRR. And the rest is kind of history because here I am today, super grateful for the opportunity to have participated in this community and in this fellowship. Slide, please. As part of the fellowship, I identified a gap in my own practice. I do not take the time for deeper reflection that I'm called towards. There were some amazing presenters I was learning from, when I was getting all these epiphanies and inspirations, and yet, instead of taking time to follow them, I'd return to work. And I would leave that all on the ground waiting for me, and much of it was sadly lost to time or to the next to-do item or to the next meeting. Three SCRR teachers come to mind when I think of this: Oriana Ides, Derek Smith, and Monique Castro. Each of them brought me insights that I really needed to reflect upon. And they led me to really think about how much time, rest, work, and inertia my healing process takes, and to wonder how could I better support myself on this journey, especially when on the outside, much of it can look like I'm not doing anything, like I'm not reflecting or engaging in practices that both embrace me and push me out of my comfort zone. But on the inside, where sometimes even I don't notice, I'm honoring my wounds, I'm seeking my ancestors, I'm metabolizing and putting myself back together into my wholeness, like a chrysalis. And that word and its imagery got me really inspired to put an image to paper. And next slide, please. This is where my image is to date. So I'm going to talk a lot on this slide. So when we experience trauma, it's a wounding of our soul and sometimes more literally also of our physical body. We are ruptured. Our bodies, brains, and spirits communicate information about our patterns for moving from rupture to renewal, or as I like to call it, sustainable mend. I like the term sustainable mend because of burnout. I want my healing and renewal to lean into the strength of resilience, like those jeans where the mended patch is stronger than the denim alone. As well, I want to be reminded that it's not a one and done. Without my active participation, I can find myself doing more than flirting with burnout. So as I was engaging and thinking with the imagery, reflection questions bubbled to the surface, almost like they'd been waiting for me to pay attention. So we're going to start at the left side of the image, where it's important to identify our trauma responses, as well as the practices that help us navigate from acute woundedness toward the chrysalis, where we are protected and have everything we need to fall apart. Also, super useful is identifying if external systems are safe for us to focus on that recovery. Moving through reactive states of being and into the more reflective state where I can sit with our woundedness within and without, how do we know we're actively in the chrysalis rather than in a free state of trauma response? How do we honor the truth that rest is necessary? How do we navigate so that we're sitting in stillness when it serves us and growing when we are ready? What can I do to support my recovery when the systems I live or work under demand I ignore calls for healing and recovery? Coming out of the chrysalis, a changed animal built from the same component parts as a caterpillar. I love this concept that we have had what we needed to thrive inside of us all along. But it raises questions. Which of my patterns and practices can support my renewal? Which ones do I want to introduce, welcome back, or shift away from? In what ways can I challenge myself and the organizations and systems I live and work under when I feel whole and cared for? But there's some extra parts we didn't talk about in this image. There's these question marks that remind me to consider, am I ready to move to a new set of questions? Or am I needing to lean in a little bit longer in the area I'm at? Or what if I experience a new trauma or a new rupture? Because that happens in healing. We can be confronted by a new trauma or suddenly reminded and viscerally in touch with an older wound. So I added these lovely arrows that are pointing in different directions to remind me this is not a linear process, nor is it a one-time trip. So as we move back and forth from someone in a traumatic reactive space to recovery, to someone who can resist or heal, or at the very least, actively participate in life. Next slide. I got super excited.
2 minutes.
Okay. As is my wont, I started thinking about how to make this accessible to more than just myself, because I am not the only person I know who leaves a great learning experience, jumps right back to work, and is aware of the desire to integrate and grow based on the learning. So how could I move this forward and share it with others, from an individual practice to a collective one? And that's what led to the image we just explored together. My original and not very accessible image, which you can see here, started off pretty jankety, but it has evolved to a beautiful one-page Google Doc that has the lovely previous image, and on the bottom, links to reflection questions for each section that I've talked about. One of my favorite insights is that me and my not scientific metaphor actually works, because not only do caterpillars go into the chrysalis with everything they need to become butterflies already inside of them, but also butterflies come out weak and they need time and use to get those strong wings that we love watching flutter. Slide 4, please. Leora and Nikki hosted an after party after each fellowship session, and those 15 minutes were such an eye-opener for me. Gifting myself the opportunity to transition to my workday more intentionally allowed me to do some of that reflection and integration I'd been missing, even in just 15 minutes. So I offer you a deceptively simple invitation. Schedule 15 minutes for integration after learning, and invite others to do the same, such that we can build a culture of taking time and savoring. This 15 minutes where you can be in community with other learners, hum or breathe into your inner self, read that article the presenter recommended, go out into the world outside, or journal about your experience, or whatever action nourishes you to sustainably create room for yourself to grow and fight the burnout that is so prevalent in our work. So my next steps is both an individual and collective practice. I'll be presenting with Kela next week, and I'll let her talk about that next. I'm frequently encouraging people to take time to care for themselves, and I'm finally taking that time alone. In August, I'll be heading to New Zealand for a super deep dive into my own sustainable mending practices and what I want to carry with myself as daily expressions of my reflection, insight, healing offerings, and resistance to oppressive systems and organizations. Finally, when I come back from New Zealand, I'll start working on a webinar to make the tool accessible to anyone interested, hopefully by December. The end in 8 minutes.
Lesley, thank you. Take a deep breath, shake it out. I know that Lesley was one of our kind, understanding fellows that allowed us to constantly bring her back from writing a dissertation in this fellowship. So thank you, Lesley. And what a wonderful transition for us now to speak with Kela, since Lesley and Kela are also collabing next week. Kela, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited to hear, because Lesley and I have this partnership together. My name is Kela Lynn. and I use she, her. I work at the Corvallis School District here in Oregon and am a social worker surrounded with pockets of crisis supports in lots of different ways. I also am a child of a father who was killed when I was 14. And I am a woman who 20 years ago had breast cancer at stage 4 and thought I was going to die. I more recently have had many of deaths in my life, and one of them has included a very dear friend of mine several years ago. And when I think about mending our hearts, I think about what grief looks like in so many different ways, including disappointingly, maybe disgustingly today, and the grief we're having for so many of our community members and ourselves about what's happening nationally for us. I am leaning into and having the opportunity, it's going to be next week and next month with Lesley to host here at the Corvallis School District for our colleagues, for our staff to be able to have a facilitated peer group support. Nikki, if you go to the next slide. One of the things that I have had the opportunity to do is teach QPR, Question, Persuade, Refer. It's a suicide prevention and intervention workshop. And we've been doing that here in the Corvallis School District for about 5 years. And as I do that, as I become that person and that face for many people, it also means that many people have reached in and leaned in about their own personal grief journey that they are having. I've had quiet conversations. I've had lean-ins for additional supports for people, either by myself or with community partners. And within that, have struggled in my heart of what are we doing for our staff to continue to do the work that they are doing day in and day out. And so I actually didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but that itch was there. And so I reached out to about a dozen people who had leaned into me, and I asked them in a survey, what at that moment in time or these moments of time would you like? What would help support you and sustain you as you process this crater of grief that you have in your heart and in your body? And they had said exponentially, like, I would like to come together. I would like that. I think that that would be a part of my support. And so that became what this is. I will have to tell you, I was like, can't you just ask me to do a packeted program that I can send to you? Because this next week has me more nervous than today. And in honoring their hearts and being in that authentic place and trying to get it right. Now, I've been in this group long enough that right is not the possibility, and it still has that hope and that belief that that's so important to me because I'm asking for their authentic hearts to share up. So the original idea given from them is creating that space and allowance for the grief work and normalizing the chrysalis before the wings. And for me, what SCRR has given me for the whole entire year is pause, be within, be a chrysalis. It's okay to sit there. How to normalize that and be okay with that. How to show up for each other in resiliency. And I hear that word, and somebody, some smart person, I don't know who they were within this group, had talked about resiliency. I'm going to get it wrong, so don't quote me. Turn off the recorder for this one. Just kidding. Resiliency was meant, I think it was, and I have yet to Google it, like an architectural or an engineering term. And resiliency meant to be part of the cogs of the whole. And that actually meant that resiliency meant the strength of this means one of these can break down while everything else continues to move. Resiliency was never meant to be an individual thing. It was always meant to be a group reflection. So that's our hope. That's my hope. And again, lucky enough to do this with Lesley, of the decision to have that community activity and the opportunity to witness, to storytell, and to have somatic healing. Before we totally move off the next slide, I want you to look at that butterfly and how beautiful it is. that butterfly is, I work professionally in this world. I also have a professional private business, and that's the logo for my private business. And that was drawn about 5 or 6 years ago from my girlfriend who passed away 3 years ago. And that, as that butterfly, as that holding spot for who we are becoming, and how my terminology is always messy, beautiful, how we get to do that and be that all along the way. So if we look at the next slide, you already know that we are going to get together in a community next week. We're doing it personally. We have provided opportunities within a bit of psychoeducation, as you've heard Lesley talk about, to be able to lean in. There will be holding space and witnessing. There will be care and connection. There will be food and nurturing inside our body, inside our hearts. We have an art project that's going to happen this next week. It's specifically about a box that has containment of whatever that is for you. We're going to give journals and different things that you can put into the box the first week. And then again, the second week, we're going to do decorating the first week with some opportunity for someone to think about, what does that box look like? It might be in reflection of the butterfly, what's before, what's in the middle, what's in the end, or a box itself, what you might keep out of, what you might put into. So however that works for people, we're trying to externalize the internalization of what is there for them. And then the next week, we're going to do stations of opportunities so people can test out some somatic healing, some artistic healing, some SCRR poetry healing. We've got different art papers to be able to connect with people, to do the writing and the connection, however that happens to be. We've got body tuning and bowl singing, all different sets of opportunities for people to connect with, to figure out what allows them, as Lesley had said, to be able to fall apart, and what allows someone to be able to heal themselves. We're hopeful, Lesley and I are hopeful, that people walk away with a box, a toolkit opportunity to be able to come back to, because we know grief happens in many different ways. When you think about the essential questions that are on the left, we're talking about for that individual or afterwards for that moment in time, like, what have you become more integrated with your past and present? What does that feel like and look like for you? How do you keep showing up for others when we think about, as this is our work group, if we're struggling showing up for ourselves, and what practices can be built daily, weekly, seasonally to allow ourselves for grief? And then the now what questions for myself in a system, like, who else do we need to connect with as a community partners to sustain this? And is this the correct path? And the reflection from the group. I think the last thing I would leave you with is, this is just endearing. I shared this with Lesley as I prepared for the group. I wanted to get out this quote. In the depths of winter, I finally learned that there was in me an invincible summer. In the depths of winter, I finally learned that there was within me an invincible summer. And I won't totally show it to you. I'm just leaning it up. Let it be known that that same girlfriend created this for me about 15 years ago. I had put it in a bookshelf, and I did not. My children did as they were cleaning the house, and it's been inside a bookshelf drawer. And when I got it out, it's filled with butterflies. I just want you to know that I continue to get those lessons from her, a preemptive lesson from her years ago, that has been winter in my heart and will continue to be winter, but there will be an invincible summer that always exists. Blessings to you as you've heard that, and as we continue on our journey, because we all know we're here and we're human, which means we all have seasons of grief and healing.